That's our goal.
I'm always looking at where the story goes next. I hope that our guests come on and share something. For Americans, they're feeling it pretty hard.
I know.
That you will leave better informed, I can tell you that.
Tonight, food pantries have soared on college campuses, one school's innovative solution.
What kind of load does that lift off of you?
And another atmospheric river might bring more flash flooding and mudslides to the west, where the storm heads next on the CBS Evening News.
We have lines going all around the block. They're going all around this block. They've never seen anything like this one.
He said himself he's going to spend more time in a courtroom than on the campaign trail. We can't win like that.
He's just an uninspiring candidate. Like, there's nothing about, Joe Biden that makes you want to listen to him.
Hello, I'm Nicole Killian in Washington, and welcome to America Decides on this President's Day. We begin in South Carolina, where we are less than a week away from the Republican presidential primary. Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley is hitting the campaign trail to make her final pitch to voters. A recent CBS News poll shows former President Trump is far ahead of the former governor in her home state. The GOP frontrunner will be in the Palmetto State tomorrow. CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now from Columbia, South Carolina. Caitlin, you spoke with Nikki Haley today. What did she tell you about the state of the race?
Hey, Nicole, good to be with you. As you mentioned, Nikki Haley is trailing by over 30 points in our polling and in other polls. And here in South Carolina, reporting on the ground for the past couple of weeks, it very much feels like Donald Trump's home turf. Nikki Haley acknowledges that this is acknowledges that she is not going to be able to win this state outright, perhaps, but wants to at least close the gap here and then move on through Super Tuesday. Take a listen to what she had to tell us. You have said that you want to be competitive here in South Carolina. What exactly does competitive look like?
Well, I think y'all will decide what's competitive, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, we want to close that gap. We want to make sure that we continue to show that there's a purpose there. And then, we're going to keep on doing what we're doing. We've got people excited in South Carolina. They're ready to vote. They've already started early voting. We'll see what happens on Saturday. And then on Sunday, we're headed to Michigan.
Polls show about a 30% or 30-point difference here. How much do you need to close the gap?
I think you'll see us close it quite a bit. I mean, right now, the goal is everybody knows I was a good governor. Now we're showing them that I can be a good president. And so that's the point of the bus tours. We're in all these small towns. We're in the big areas. We're in the small areas. And it's touching hands. It's answering questions. And it's reminding them, one, what we did in South Carolina and the fact that we could be that successful in America.
I want to ask you a little bit about that, because when we're here on the ground, our polling shows that people do approve of your job as governor, but they give Trump a higher approval as president, and that they're thinking about this race more nationally than they are locally here in South Carolina. What do you make of that, and why do you think that is?
Well, I think they should be thinking nationally. I mean, we've got big issues, whether it's $34 trillion in debt, whether it's an open border, whether it's the fact that our kids aren't reading at a good level, whether it's the fact that we've got wars around the world. These are big issues. But at the end of the day, the one thing we did in South Carolina was every crisis, every challenge, we didn't divide each other over it. We brought people in. We didn't cause chaos. We had sanity. And when you look at things that are happening, Republicans and Democrats have both gotten us into this debt situation. But also look at what America's telling you. 70% of Americans don't want to see a Trump-Biden rematch. 59% of Americans think Donald Trump's too old and Joe Biden's too old to be president. This is a time where we have watched Trump talk about anything from revenge after New Hampshire to being a victim after all of these court cases. He's going to be in a courtroom for the rest of this year. You can't win a general election if you're sitting in a courtroom. And every poll shows that.
So in order to win the nomination, you have to win some states. What exactly are you looking for as you head to Super Tuesday? What states do you think you can win?
We're playing all of them. You'll have, after South Carolina, you're going to have another 20 states vote. But this is the fact that as much as everybody's wanting to say, but what will you do here? Only 3 states have voted. We don't anoint kings here. Let's let states vote. Let's let them go and decide what they want. If they're telling us 70% don't want a Trump-Biden rematch, let's listen to them and let them vote. That's what the people want. I'm fine doing the work. I don't mind taking the hits. I don't mind taking the bruises, because you have to do that. We can't keep living the same way that we are. It is not normal to have this kind of chaos in our country. It's not normal to have this kind of anger in our country. But then you look at the national security perspective, whether it's Russia, China, or Iran. You've got Russia now putting soldiers around the Baltic countries, and you've got Donald Trump saying that he would encourage Putin to invade those countries if they weren't pulling their weight. That's saying that Donald Trump's going to side with a thug, as opposed to those countries that stood with us after 9/11. He's going to side with someone who kills his political opponents, who arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. That's not what we want. It's that chaos that's gotten us into the mess that we're in.
So, Nicole, with this huge uphill climb that Nikki Haley has in her home state and in the states after South Carolina, she is really kind of leaning into these criticisms against Donald Trump, mostly focused on the legal cases and on his approach and stance towards Russia. That has been kind of a key to her stump speech. But the legal proceedings are interesting because, as you know, Nicole, having covered this race as well, this was something that many of Donald Trump's rivals were, cautious about criticizing him over the course of this campaign. And we saw, with each indictment, his base and Republicans kind of rallied around him. Now that she is the kind of the lone survivor of Trump's rivals, she's really taking this point to go after him on the court cases, arguing that he's going to be in the courtroom, not on the campaign trail. But so far, Nicole, that hasn't dented his support. In fact, supporters that we've talked to of Donald Trump at rallies here in South Carolina say that it's made them want to support him even more.
All right, Caitlin Huey Burns, thanks so much. We'll see how things play out over the next couple of days. Former President Trump is using his legal battles in his pitch to voters. In Michigan over the weekend, the GOP frontrunner said that judges and prosecutors in his cases are, quote, nasty. CBS News campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi joins us now. And Olivia, I want to talk about South Carolina in a moment, but first I just kind of want to start with the former president's latest Truth Social post. We saw him today for the first time weighing in on the death of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. He seems to be comparing himself to Navalny and references his current legal woes. He says the sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what is happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression. I mean, what do you make of that?
I mean, it's his first time really publicly addressing the death of Alexei Navalny directly. On Friday, after the death of Navalny, he put out this statement. It was quite bland, saying that the destruction of the world is more dangerous due to President Joe Biden. But over the weekend, we had heard some chatter in conservative circles tying Trump to Navalny, that he, like Navalny, is a victim of the system, that he also is being politically persecuted. And really what this tells me is it's part of this broader effort that Donald Trump is using to tie Biden to his investigation, saying that they're politically motivated and that Biden is acting as if Putin would, like a dictator. Again, it's this victim mentality. He often says that Biden is a threat to democracy on the campaign trail. And yet at the same time, not calling out Putin. Exactly, not addressing Putin directly in any of these statements. We should also note that Biden has said repeatedly, and the DOJ has said repeatedly, that there's no coordination between the two on these investigations and trials into the former president. And then obviously turning back domestically here, we just heard Caitlin's report. We know the former president will be in South Carolina tomorrow. What more can we expect from that visit? And why is he so far ahead of Nikki Haley in the polls when this is her home state? I mean, Caitlin kind of nailed it there when she talked about these investigations into Trump, and especially with the trials. I was in Michigan over the weekend and talking with some voters, and they are equally as angry as Donald Trump is when it comes to these trials and the fines that he's supposed to pay. One of the people I spoke with said, "I see no fraud," directly mirroring things that Donald Trump has said. And the interesting part about that is that it's motivating for them. That's the challenge for Nikki Haley here. How do you make this argument that the courtroom is going to be part of the campaign trail when that is something that motivates voters in her home state? That's a really difficult barrier for her to try to overcome there.
And you talked about voters being angry about this, but we saw that the president got kind of a different reaction when he was in Pennsylvania this weekend at SneakerCon. It's this footwear conference. He was unveiling this new gold pair of Trump high tops. Let's take a listen to the reception that he got at that event.
There's a lot of emotion in this room. Thank you. Thank you. So the really nice thing is we have lines, and I want to thank Chase and I want to thank Alan, but we have lines going all around the block. They're going all around this block. They've never seen anything like this one.
So maybe a different kind of anger here and some cheers too, in addition to the boos. I mean, what happened at this event?
I mean, it was different than any campaign event I've ever seen before. Donald Trump said that he's always wanted to unveil sneakers and have a sneaker line. This was an interesting moment to do it, but part of this broader effort for Trump to do this, to go into a battleground state like Philadelphia and into a Democratic stronghold, or into a Democratic state, battleground state like Pennsylvania, Democratic stronghold like Philadelphia, is to reach out to younger and more diverse voters. Donald Trump has said multiple times on the campaign trail that he wants to make a dent into Black voters and get more of them onto his side. Perhaps this was part of that broader effort to go to SneakerCon.
So he thinks he can do it by selling sneakers?
I think he does. I think he thinks that's the way in, is to perhaps appeal to a broader, more diverse crowd that way.
And I guess talk about the timing. I don't know if this was something that was always on his radar, or, I mean, this obviously came after that major legal judgment on Friday where, you know, his company and he himself will now face millions of dollars in penalties. I mean, was this always on the schedule?
It wasn't on our schedule, and it was nothing we were aware of that was coming up. It was announced on Thursday that perhaps he would be going to SneakerCon, and then he himself announced it right after the decision came down from the New York civil fraud trial case. The timing is interesting. It's a way for him to raise money. I mean, these sneakers are ranging from about $200 to $400. He even sold some of them that were signed for about $9,000. So all of this goes into his ability to pay these massive, massive fines that are now being weighed against him. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that he's going to have to pay in the coming months.
And I believe they sold out. Olivia Rinaldi, thank you so much. Well, next, we'll take a look at how the former president is doing that, using his legal battles to further his campaign. Could it benefit him? Here's streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
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 It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish
That
you and
we
I are going to
just-
have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good? Mm-hmm. Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7.
that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
Human remains found this week.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
A gripping true crime original, 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
How can we become our best selves? That may be more about character than talent.
The ultimate mark of your potential is how far you've climbed, not how high you've gone.
Realizing your true potential with Adam Grant as we go person to person.
Welcome back to America Decides. A judge's ruling on Friday in former President Trump's civil fraud trial could deal a serious blow to his finances. The GOP frontrunner and the Trump Organization were ordered to pay penalties of more than $354 million. That total jumps to over $453 million when you factor in interest. CBS News campaign reporter Katrina Kaufman joins us now. Katrina is also an attorney. Katrina, thanks for being with us. So what exactly does this judgment mean for the former president financially? Could he go out of business?
Hi, Nicole. So this is a serious blow to Donald Trump. As you just read, these are very, very astronomically high numbers that would be a big hit to his bank account. But basically, right now, the judge has issued the decision. And next, we'll be getting a judgment. That should happen in a week or two. And nothing can actually happen until that judgment comes out. But once it does, the state could start going after Donald Trump's money. They could start freezing his bank accounts. They could start selling off, having the state sell off his stock. So what he's going to end up doing is either trying to get a stay on this ruling to get more time from the court, or he can post a bond, in which case that would depend on his agreement with the bonding company. He might have to give them cash, or maybe he could give them a mortgage on one of his properties, a letter of credit. There are different ways that he could deal with this. So it's hard to say exactly how soon he's going to take a real cash financial hit from this, but this is a substantial amount of money for him.
And if he does take any kind of financial hits, what role does the Republican National Committee play, or could they play? I mean, can they help him pay for some of this?
So my understanding is that they're not prohibited from giving him money for this. They have helped him with legal fees. So it's possible that they could help him with the judgment as well, but they really don't have this much cash on hand. At the end of 2023, I think they only had $8 million, so that really is not going to cover this bill.
And we're also awaiting the Supreme Court's decision on whether to pause the immunity ruling in the 2020 election case. How might the justices rule on this particular issue?
There are a number of ways that this could go. The judges could choose to grant the stay, in which case that would put the ruling on pause, and then they could either give Trump a lot more time to petition for cert for them to take the case, or they could actually treat this emergency stay application as a petition for cert and make a decision right now about whether or not they're going to weigh in on this case, either denying or granting that petition. So we might see either a pause in the ruling or find out very soon if the Supreme Court wants to weigh in on this really important issue.
All right, a lot of legal headlines to follow, and Katrina Kaufman, we know you'll be on top of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, a wake-up call for the Biden campaign, a warning from an influential radio host and one-time Biden backer about the upcoming campaign. You're streaming America Decides.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She's a country music legend, philanthropist, fashion icon, and now rock star.
I think there's a lot to be said about being comfortable with who you are.
Find out what's next for Dolly Parton when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
She is a beloved American icon and head of a media empire. But is Oprah Winfrey happy? How do you define happiness?
Yeah, I call it happiness.
Find out when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. President Biden said he is considering additional sanctions against Russia following the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. He was also asked about House Republicans' lack of support for Ukraine aid. Here's a bit of that exchange.
Mr. President, would you go as far as to say that Alexei Navalny's blood is on the hands of House Republicans right now?
I wouldn't use that term. They're making a big mistake not responding. Look. The way they're walking away from the threat of Russia, the way they're walking away from NATO, the way they're walking away from meeting our obligations is just shocking. I've been here a while. I've never seen anything like this.
Deepa Shivaram and Shelby Talcott join us now. Deepa is a White House correspondent for NPR, and Shelby is a politics reporter for Semaphore. Deepa, I want to start off with you and with the president's comments there. I mean, obviously, he's frustrated with House Republicans, and we know a delegation of lawmakers went over to the security conference in Munich, where it appears they also got an earful over Congress not passing Ukraine aid. Obviously, they did it in the Senate, but, you know, what are the real impacts of this? I mean, how might this affect the war the longer this stalemate over Ukraine aid in Congress drags on?
I mean, the White House has been very clear for months now. I mean, this is going all the way back to the end of 2023, right? Saying that there is no magic pot of gold. There's no magic pot of money that's left over for Ukraine. If Congress can't pass this money, can't fund this extra aid for Ukraine, Ukraine doesn't have the ability to support itself. And so, of course, you know, where Vice President Kamala Harris is in Munich, where all these lawmakers are in Munich, they're getting questions from leaders all over the world, our German allies, our European allies, asking, you know, what's the plan forward here? And for President Biden, all he really can turn to is point to the House and say, yeah, it's on them. We're waiting on them to act on this. And you can see, you know, that kind of unfolding on so many issues. But right now, Ukraine aid is very much the focus for this president, who is himself getting a lot of questions about this.
And we know Speaker Johnson has pretty much made clear that it's unlikely he's going to bring this legislation that the Senate passed to the House floor. So is there any kind of plan B, or anything that the administration may be trying to do as a workaround?
Yeah, there's definitely things that I think you can see the administration trying to piece together with whatever they can cobble together in this case. But they've been very clear that the best case scenario forward is for Congress to pass this aid. And so you see, White House players, the Department of Defense, we hear a lot from National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby talk about this, that there are ways that the White House is trying to see, what next steps they can take. But at the same time, they are still going to be calling on Congress. They are still going to be calling on the House to make this aid package work, because at the end of the day, it has been bipartisan and continues to have that support.
And then very briefly, I know the president mentioned he may consider some additional sanctions against Russia. Do we know at this point what he might be considering or what might be on the table?
At this point, we are waiting to see the details of that, but it'll be curious to see how the president, he's traveling this week, to the West Coast, and we'll be meeting with donors and everything there. So what he can send to the message he can send to his party and how the White House can move forward on this, we're waiting to see what next steps they want to take.
And I want to turn now to politics back here at home and to the 2024 campaign. I want to bring you in, Shelby, because over the weekend we heard from radio show host Charlemagne the God. He kind of gave his take on the 2024 campaign. Let's take a listen.
The crooks are the Republicans. The cowards are the Democrats, because they don't fight hard enough on anything. And right now, it feels like the couch is going to win. He's just an uninspiring candidate. There's nothing about, Joe Biden that makes you want to listen to him. Donald Trump seems more sincere about his lies than Joe Biden does about his truth.
Of course, Charlemagne the God's a very popular radio show host, but he also has kind of been a thorn in the Biden campaign side. So does he have a point? I mean, how concerned is the Biden campaign about people potentially sitting this election out on their couches, as Charlemagne just said?
Well, when you talk to the Biden campaign, they've continued to maintain that it is really early on in the race. We still technically do have a primary, although Biden officials have, publicly said they believe that Donald Trump will be the nominee. So they just believe that people are not yet tuning in. And once it becomes an official race between Donald Trump and Joe Biden, that voters will begin to turn out and will begin to be interested. Now, on the flip side, I have heard that argument that we just heard multiple times. And the main concern from Democrats who have been more critical of Biden and the Biden campaign is that voters at this moment are not excited. And they're not excited about both options, but they're particularly not excited about Joe Biden. And so we heard, I think going forward, the Biden administration is going to have to make changes in order to get voters excited. That's going to entail having surrogates out on the field more and more often, which we've seen, and then their campaign ads, what they do with that and how they can tap into some of these voter bases that they dominated last election, but they're struggling with right now.
And I understand you also have some new reporting about what the campaign is trying to do to pitch the president to voters. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the Biden campaign and Democrats are going to have a ton of money to spend this cycle, and they're going to use a lot of it on ads, and not just traditional ads, but they're also going to TikTok, as we saw after the Super Bowl. They're using these sort of new factions. They're going to go on YouTube. We saw him sit down with that Black family in North Carolina. These are all ways where they believe that they can target the voter base they need. And the argument I've heard from the Biden campaign, we've heard a lot of criticism that he doesn't do some of these traditional sit-down interviews. They say, well, these aren't the voter base that we need to talk to right now isn't watching traditional news. And so that's how they're going to sort of move forward. I think they're going to continue to try to circumvent and go around traditional news. And they're going to use some of these other platforms to try to pitch younger voters, to try to pitch Black voters. And they want them back just like they managed to get them back in 2020.
Yeah, and Deepa, I know you spent a lot of time covering the vice president as well. Charlemagne kind of in that same interview also kind of made the point that, perhaps the president should lean in more on the vice president. Sometimes other folks argue otherwise, but kind of what are you hearing? I mean, we are seeing her kind of take a larger role on the trail. Do you think that's expected to continue?
Absolutely. I mean, you see her take on this issue of abortion, right, which is monumental for Democrats. They need to keep plugging this issue. They need to keep talking about it, make sure voters are thinking about it all the way through November. It's been a successful election topic for them since Roe was overturned. And, she is the first woman in this role. And so that is the best messenger they have. And so you're going to see her talking about that. You're going to see her talking about gun control, another issue that reaches younger voters, voters of color at a higher rate than other topics. And so you really are seeing her tap into these voter groups that are so critical for Democrats going into the rest of this year and reaching them in a way that Joe Biden, can't really connect as well. And so they're hoping that, she can kind of build some of that up as Democrats are sort of trying to claw their way back in.
I was going to say, do you
groups.
think she has built up more credibility, if you will, with the base? Because there have been some detractors who feel that she hasn't been as effective, but the more she's getting out there, do you think
I think that key part of getting
more
out
comfortable
there,
with her?
The campaign will argue, and I think even voters, when you hear from them, will argue, I feel differently about her once I see her in the room. Seeing Kamala Harris on social media, hearing about Kamala Harris through your friends or family, if you're a voter and you get to see her face to face or she comes to your town, people have a much different perception of her once they see her in person. And so you're seeing her travel all over the country right now. You can definitely expect that to ramp up.
All right, Deepa Shivaram and Shelby Talcott, thanks so much. And that does it for us today. We will be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. You are streaming CBS News.
Original documentary from